A woman in a simple gray pantsuit is told to go wait with the other defendants. She's just trying to find her new office, but the court clerk sizes up her dark skin and dismisses her. The clerk, a woman who has ruled this courthouse lobby for 20 years, lets out a high, sharp laugh. "A judge? You, honey? That's the funniest thing I've heard all day." She turns her back, not knowing her entire world is about to be dismantled because the woman she just insulted isn't a defendant. She isn't a lawyer. She is Judge Isolde Merrick, and she just saw something she was never supposed to see. The Waverly County Courthouse was not a building that welcomed you. It was a building that processed you. It stood 6 stories tall, a block of imposing soot-stained granite from the 1950s. Its small, slit-like windows looked less like portals for light and more like arrow slits in a fortress. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale coffee, industrial floor wax, and the quiet, metallic scent of desperation. The main hall was still mercifully quiet. The morning rush of defendants, witnesses, and frantic lawyers hadn't yet begun. Isolde Merrick stood for a moment, just inside the heavy bronze doors, adjusting the strap of the simple leather satchel on her shoulder. She was new, not just to the courthouse but to the state, having accepted a midterm transfer to fill a sudden vacancy on the Superior Court bench. She was here early in her civilian clothes, a charcoal gray pantsuit that was professional yet anonymous. She always did this. On her first day at any new assignment, she arrived before the chaos, before the robes and the gavel, to simply watch, to feel the rhythm of the place. A courtroom, she believed, had a heartbeat, and often that heartbeat was rhythmic, sick. Her eyes scanned the grand, echoing lobby. To her right, a long, scratched wooden bench. To her left, the main clerk of court's office, a fortress within the fortress, protected by a wall of thick, bullet-resistant glass. There were 3 windows, but only one was open, casting a pale yellow light onto the linoleum floor. Behind that window sat a woman. She had a magnificent, towering beehive of blonde gray hair that looked like it had been sprayed into concrete submission. Her glasses were on a beaded chain around her neck, and her face was set in a permanent expression of sour authority. A small engraved plastic sign on the glass read, "Dolores Fitch, Head Clerk." Isolde watched as a young man in an ill-fitting suit, clearly a brand new lawyer from the public defender's office, approached Dolores's window. "Excuse me, Miss Fitch," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I'm just trying to file a continuance motion for State versus Whitaker, I was told." Dolores didn't even look up from her computer. She held up one sharp-nailed finger. The lawyer physically recoiled as if she'd slapped him. He waited 10 seconds, 30. A full minute passed. Isolde noted the power play. Dolores was teaching him his place. Finally, Dolores sighed. A long, theatrical breath of pure inconvenience. She turned her head slowly. "Whitaker." "Right. You're late," she snapped. The young lawyer stammered. It's... The filing deadline is 9. The young lawyer stammered. It's... The filing deadline is 9. Dolores corrected him, her voice dripping with condescension. My time is valuable. Deadline was yesterday. You public defenders think you can just wander in here anytime you please and dump your paperwork on my desk. I have judges to manage." She snatched the papers from his hand. "Go wait. I'll get to it when I get to it. And your tie is crooked." The lawyer, face burning red, mumbled a thank you and scurried away, straightening his tie. Isolde let out a slow, quiet breath. So that's the gatekeeper, she thought. She knew the type. Every courthouse had one, a career bureaucrat who had mistaken their small vital cog in the machine for the entire engine. They didn't just file papers, they wielded power. They controlled access, schedules, and by extension, the flow of justice itself. And this one, Isolde suspected, enjoyed the taste of that power far too much. She adjusted her satchel and walked forward. Her heels made a sharp, clean click-clack on the floor, a sound that seemed to annoy Dolores Fitch before she even arrived. Isolde stood at the window. She gave the clerk a polite, neutral smile. "Good morning," she said. Dolores's eyes did a quick, dismissive scan from Isolde's simple, unstyled hair, down her dark face over the plain pantsuit and to her practical shoes. It was a comprehensive 2-second inventory of her perceived status. The verdict was clear in the clerk's eyes. Unimportant. "Morning," Dolores said, her tone flat. "What case?" "No case," Isolde replied, keeping her voice pleasant. "My name is Isolde Merrick. I'm the new judicial appointment for 3B. I'm here to pick up my keys and the welcome packet from the court administrator." Dolores Fitch went perfectly still. She looked up from her screen, and this time the look was not dismissive. It was openly, shockingly evaluative. She looked Isolde up and down again. Then a small, tight smile pulled at the corner of her mouth. "Defendant check-in is down the hall. Room 104, she said, gesturing vaguely with her pen. "You're early. They don't open till 8. Isolde's own smile didn't waver, but her eyes went cold. "I'm sorry. I think you misheard me. I'm not a defendant. I'm Judge Merrick. I'm taking over Judge Langford's calendar in 3B. This time Dolores Fitch didn't smile. She laughed. It wasn't a small chuckle. It was a loud, high, barking cackle that echoed in the empty lobby. It was a laugh of pure, unadulterated ridicule. "A judge?" she cackled, leaning back in her chair and pressing a hand to her chest. "Honey, that's Rich." "Oh, they'll just let anyone play dress-up these days, won't they?" She leaned forward, her face a mask of patronizing condescension. "Look, lady, I don't know what you're trying to pull. Maybe you're one of those sovereign citizen types, or maybe you're just plain lost. But judges," she said, tapping the glass, "don't look like you, and they don't just wander in off the street." "Don't look like me," Isolde repeated, her voice dropping 10 degrees. "You heard me?" Dolores snapped, her brief humor evaporating into pure venom. "Now I've got actual work to do. Go on, get. Go wait with the rest of the public over on the benches until your real case is called, and don't bother me again." Dolores Fitch swiveled her chair around, presenting Isolde with her stiff, beehived back. It was the ultimate dismissal. Isolde stood at the window. The silence in the lobby was profound. The young PD lawyer was watching from the far corner, his eyes wide with a mixture of horror and fascination. Isolde felt the familiar, hot rush of anger. It was an old, tired companion. The casual, baked-in racism that assumed her skin color dictated her station. She could have escalated. She could have pulled out her judicial ID card issued by the governor's office. She could have demanded to see the court administrator, a man named Desmond Quill. But a different instinct took over. The sharp, predatory instinct of a prosecutor, which she had been for 15 years before taking the bench. Dolores Fitch wasn't just rude. She was bold. This level of open contempt didn't grow in a vacuum. It was nurtured. It was a sign of entitlement so deep that it felt completely protected. And Isolde, who had been planning to go straight to her new chambers, made a different decision. "Fine," Isolde said, her voice perfectly calm. "I'll wait." She turned, not with a shuffle of defeat, but with a deliberate, measured pace. She walked to the hard wooden bench against the far wall. She sat down, placed her leather satchel in her lap, and crossed her legs. She was no longer just feeling the rhythm of the courthouse. She was hunting. Dolores Fitch, from her glass fortress, was the most powerful person in this lobby, and she had just made the critical, fatal mistake of laughing at the one person who had just become more powerful than her. The lobby began to fill. The wave was composed of people who had to be there. The defendants on bond, the families, the people fighting evictions. They shuffled in, clutching pieces of paper, their faces drawn with anxiety. They formed a disorganized, nervous line in front of Dolores' window. From her vantage point, Isolde Merrick had a perfect, unobstructed view. She sat as still as a heron, her gaze missing nothing. She watched Dolores' theater. To a white man in a crisp suit, she was all, "Yes, sir, Mr. Sloan." And, "Right away, sir?" To a panicked-looking Hispanic woman holding a crying baby, she was a brick wall. "English!" Dolores barked. "I don't speak whatever that is. Next!" To a young black man asking where to pay a fine, she sighed. "Do I look like a cashier? Go to the basement and tuck your shirt in. This is a courthouse, not a nightclub." It was a disgusting, predictable display, but then Isolde saw it. The man in the crisp suit, the one Dolores had called Mr. Sloan, returned. His name was Barrett Sloan. Isolde recognized him vaguely from a legal review. He was a bottom feeder, a fixer who specialized in DUIs for the rich and messy divorces. He was all cologne, expensive watch, and reptilian charm. He didn't stand in line. He walked right up to the side of the glass booth to a small, solid door marked Clerk's Office, Staff Only. He gave it a specific rat-a-tat knock. A moment later, the door was unlocked from the inside. Dolores Fitch herself opened it. Just a crack. Her entire demeanor had changed. The sour, combative mask was gone, replaced by a greedy, obsequious smile. "Barrett, you're early," she whispered, her voice carrying in the quiet hall. "Got a client with an arrangement?" Sloan murmured, slipping a hand into his jacket. "You have that thing we discussed, the AM docket assignment right here," Dolores said. She discreetly passed him a single sheet of paper folded twice. Isolde watched, laser-focused. A docket assignment. Why the secrecy? Lawyers could pull that online. Unless this was a pre-assignment. Unless Dolores was letting him know which judge his case would be randomly assigned to before the assignment was officially made, giving him time to prepare a judge-specific motion, or worse, file a last-second continuance if he got a judge he didn't like. It was gaming the system. Sloan took the paper and just as smoothly passed her an envelope. It was a standard white business envelope, but it was thick, too thick for a letter. It was the thickness of folded cash. Dolores took it without a second glance, slipping it into the drawer of her desk. "Pleasure doing business," she said. "Always, Dolores," Sloan said, flashing a toothy grin. He turned and strode out of the courthouse, the picture of confidence. Isolde felt her blood run cold. This wasn't just racism. This wasn't just a bitter woman on a power trip. This was felony corruption. This was bribery happening in plain sight minutes before the court was even in session. She had been here for less than 30 minutes, and she had just witnessed the clerk of court taking a bribe to compromise the integrity of the judicial lottery. She almost stood up. Her instinct was to flash her badge, call the bailiffs, and have them both arrested, but she held back. The prosecutor in her took over. One observation is an incident. Two is a pattern. She waited. Minutes later, a woman ran into the lobby. She was frantic, her eyes red from crying, her hair a mess. She clutched a thick sheaf of documents to her chest. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. She ran to Dolores' window where the line was now 5 deep. "Please," the woman begged, cutting the line. "Please, I have to file this. It's a restraining order." "He found my sister's address. He said he's coming. Please, I have to file it before my hearing." The man in line, a construction worker in a dusty jacket, turned. "Hey, lady, back of the line." "I can't," she sobbed, pressing her papers against the glass. "Please, ma'am. Dolores, please." Dolores Fitch looked at the woman with a face of utter boredom. "First, you don't cut the line. Second, all TROs and ex parte motions had to be filed by 8 a.m. to be heard this morning. You're late. You'll have to file it, and it will be on tomorrow's docket." "Tomorrow?" the woman shrieked, a sound of pure terror. He could find me by tomorrow. I don't have until tomorrow. It's right here." Can't you just stamp it?" "It's past 8, Dolores said, pointing to the clock. "The computer locks the 8 a.m. filings. My hands are tied. It's the system." The woman completely broke down, sliding down the glass wall onto the floor, her sobs echoing. No, you don't understand." Isolde watched. This was the moment. This was the test. Dolores watched the woman cry for a long, cold moment. Then she sighed as if dealing with a petulant child. She came out from behind the door, walking over to the sobbing woman. "Look," Dolores said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that Isolde could just barely overhear. "Look, get up. You're making a scene." She helped the woman to her feet. I might be able to help you. The system is flexible sometimes, but the late filing override requires a fee. A significant one for the, administrative hassle." The woman's head snapped up, hope and confusion warring on her face. "A fee? I'll pay it. I'll pay... How much?" "The fine for an emergency override," Dolores said, her eyes dead, "is $200 cash." Isolde watched the woman's face fall. 200. I have 150. It's all I have until my check." Dolores considered this. She glanced around the lobby. Her eyes swept right over Isolde, dismissing her as part of the worthless scenery. 150 will have to do," Dolores conceded as if doing her a great favor. "Give it to me." The woman fumbled in her purse, her hands shaking so badly she could barely open her wallet. She pulled out a wad of crumpled bills, a 50, 4 20s, and 5 1s. She handed them over. Dolores took the cash, palmed it, and then took the woman's paperwork. "Wait here," she commanded. She went back into her booth. Isolde watched her every move. Dolores sat at her computer. She typed for a moment, then she opened a drawer, pulled out a manual date and timestamp, and fiddled with the dials. She rolled it back. She stamped the woman's papers. Received at an earlier time. She had backdated a legal filing in exchange for a cash bribe. She was extorting a domestic violence victim. Isolde Merrick slowly closed her eyes. The rage she felt was so cold, so pure, it was almost serene. It was the rage of a surgeon identifying a cancer. This wasn't just a rotten cog. This was a tumor that was poisoning the entire institution. Dolores came back out and handed the papers to the woman. "There, stamped. You're on the docket. Go to courtroom 2A now. Get out of my sight." The woman, still crying, but now with relief, thanked her profusely and ran toward the elevators. Dolores Fitch went back to her desk, slid the $150 into the same drawer as Barrett Sloane's envelope, and called. "Next." Isolde looked at the clock on the wall. She had a new purpose. This was no longer about her own dignity. It was no longer about the sting of racism. That was the symptom. The disease was Dolores Fitch, and Judge Isolde Merrick was here to cut it out. For the next few minutes, Isolde sat. She did not move. She just watched. She cataloged every interaction, every sneer, every smirk. She saw Dolores lose a file for a low-income housing advocate, forcing a delay, and then find it for a corporate lawyer who brought her a box of expensive-looking pastries. The entire lobby was her personal kingdom, and she ruled it with a blend of petty tyranny and calculated corruption. A tall, uniformed man came through the side doors. He had bailiff on his jacket and a name tag that read, Officer Garrick. He had a weary, seen-it-all face. He nodded at Dolores. Morning, Dolores. Usual chaos. You know it, Frank, Dolores said, smiling warmly at him. It was a complete transformation. The dregs are out in force today. Judge Langford would have had half of them in holding for contempt by now. I don't know about this new one. Merrick, right? From out of state? Garrick asked, sipping a coffee. That's the one, Dolores said, lowering her voice, but not enough. Some affirmative action hire, I'm sure. Probably won't know a motion to compel from a motion to dismiss. We'll have to train another one. It's exhausting. Isolde listened, her expression unchanged. Affirmative action hire. Another barb, another assumption. She filed it away with the rest. Well, Garrick said, finishing his coffee and tossing the cup. Time to open the doors to the circus. You ready for 3B? As I'll ever be, Dolores sighed. Garrick walked to courtroom 3B, which was right off the main lobby, and unlocked the heavy wooden doors. The first few lawyers and citizens waiting for the docket began to trickle in. Dolores gathered a stack of files, her face settling back into its sour mask. This was the moment. Isolde Merrick stood up. The sudden movement after her long stillness drew Dolores's eye. Isolde zipped her leather satchel. She adjusted the collar of her pantsuit. She walked not to the clerk's window, but directly toward the judge's and staff only door beside it, the same one Barrett Sloan had used. Dolores's head snapped up. The casual contempt was back, now sharpened with irritation. Hey, you! I told you that door is not for the public, she shouted. The entire lobby quieted. Are you deaf? I told you to wait on the bench. Isolde ignored her. She reached the door. Ma'am. Dolores was on her feet now, her voice rising to a screech. I will have you held in contempt of court. You can't just... Isolde reached into her suit pocket and pulled out a simple white plastic key card. It was the temporary all-access pass given to her by the head of state judicial administration pending her permanent ID. She didn't look at Dolores. She faced the small black scanner on the wall and held the card up. There was a quiet beep, and the light on the scanner flashed from red to green. Dolores Fitch's screech died in her throat, choked off by a sudden sharp intake of breath. The lobby was dead silent. The only sound was the heavy click of the electronic lock disengaging. Isolde pushed the door open. She paused in the doorway and turned her head. She looked directly at Dolores Fitch, whose face had gone the color of spoiled milk. The beehive hair seemed to wilt. Her mouth was open, but no sound was coming out. Ms. Fitch, Judge Isolde Merrick said, her voice quiet, but carrying the unmistakable ring of absolute authority. It was a voice that didn't request, it commanded. It is nearly time. Court convenes soon. In that time, I expect 3 things. Dolores's hands, which had been on her hips, were now shaking at her sides. First, Isolde continued, you will retrieve the keys to my chambers, chambers 3B, from wherever you have them stored. Second, you will fetch my welcome packet from the court administrator's office. I'm sure Mr. Quill will be fascinated to hear about my reception this morning. And third, Isolde said, her eyes boring into the terrified clerk, you will bring me a cup of black coffee. You will place all 3 items on my bench in courtroom 3B. You will then return to your station and prepare for the roll call. Isolde let the orders hang in the air. The young public defender, who had been lingering to watch, was now desperately trying to hide his smile behind a case file. Your Honor? Dolores stammered, her voice a panicked whisper. I didn't recognize you. I thought... You thought, Isolde said, cutting her off with surgical precision, that I was a defendant. You thought I was the public. You thought I didn't look like a judge. What you failed to think, Miss Fitch, is that the person you are speaking to, any person who walks into this courthouse, deserves a baseline of human dignity. Your assumptions are not my problem, but they are, as of this moment, your problem. Isolde stepped through the doorway. Soon, Miss Fitch, she said over her shoulder. Don't be late. It sets a bad example. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving a stunned, silent lobby in her wake. Dolores Fitch stood frozen for a full 5 seconds, her face a grotesque mask of dawning horror. The blood drained from her head so fast she had to grip her desk to stay upright. The humiliation was total. The power dynamic of the Waverly County Courthouse had just been inverted instantly and violently. Then terror gave way to panic. She flew into motion, grabbing her own keys, fumbling at her drawer, then sprinting as much as she could sprint down the hall toward the administrator's office. She was no longer a queen. She was a terrified servant, running an errand for a new master. And the worst part, the part that was making her heart hammer against her ribs, wasn't just the humiliation. It was the sudden, sickening memory of Barrett Sloane. The envelope, the woman with the restraining order, the backdated stamp. How long had that black woman, that judge, been sitting on that bench? What exactly had she seen? The time Isolde spent in her new chambers was a blur of focused preparation. The room smelled of old books and lemon polish. Judge Langford, her predecessor, had left nothing behind. It was a blank slate. Isolde found the judicial robes hanging in a tall wooden wardrobe. She pulled the heavy black fabric over her shoulders, the familiar weight settling on her. It was her armor. She was not, as Dolores had suggested, an affirmative action hire. She was a Harvard law graduate, a former assistant U.S. attorney, and a federal prosecutor who had dismantled 2 of the largest racketeering rings in Chicago. She had taken this state-level judgeship to be closer to her aging father. She hadn't come here looking for a fight, but Dolores Fitch, in her arrogance, had just started a war. Isolde stood behind the thick wooden door that led to the bench. She heard the muffled sounds of the courtroom settling. Officer Garrick, his face carefully neutral, bellowed, "All rise. The Waverly County Superior Court, Part 3B, is now in session. The Honorable Judge Isolde Merrick presiding." The door opened. Isolde walked out and up to the bench. The courtroom was medium-sized and packed. Lawyers filled the jury box in the front rows. Defendants and their families. A mix of anxiety and boredom filled the back. And at the clerk station to her right stood Dolores Fitch. She looked as if she had aged 10 years. Her face was pale and slick with sweat. The keys to the chambers, the welcome packet, and a styrofoam cup of coffee were all placed precisely as ordered on the corner of Isolde's bench. Isolde sat. The room sat. The scraping of chairs echoed. She opened the first file. "Good morning," she said, her voice amplified by the microphone, crisp and clear. "I'm Judge Merrick. I will be handling this calendar moving forward. I have my own set of rules. They are simple. Be on time, be prepared, and be respectful. To me, to the court, and to each other. We will conduct the business of the people with integrity and efficiency. Is that understood? A murmur of, "Yes, Your Honor," rippled through the lawyers. "Excellent," Isolde said. She looked down at the docket and she saw the first case, State versus Whitaker, the young public defender's case. "First up," she said, "docket 901, State versus Whitaker. Counsel, please approach." The young PD, the one from the lobby, walked forward, his eyes still wide. "Your Honor," he began, "I filed a motion for continuance this morning. I see it. And I also see that the state opposes." The assistant district attorney, a sharp woman in a blue suit, stood. "We do, Your Honor. The victim has flown in twice. We are ready to proceed." Isolde looked back at the PD. "Counselor, your reason." My client's alibi witness was just located. She lives in rural..." "Motion granted," Isolde said. The ADA and the PD both blinked. Your Honor," the ADA said. "Motion granted, counsel," Isolde repeated, staring at the file. "The right to present a full defense is constitutional. The inconvenience to the state is logistical. We will find a new date." She looked at Dolores. "Ms. Fitch, please find a new trial date for, let's say, 6 weeks from now. Please coordinate with both counsels." Dolores fumbled with the computer, her hands visibly shaking so much she could barely type. The young PD was staring, mouth agape. He had just won a motion he was sure to lose. It was the first subtle shift. Isolde proceeded through the next 5 cases with rapid, sharp efficiency. She denied a routine delay from a high-priced lawyer. She granted a hardship request from a defendant. She was fair, fast, and unyielding. The lawyers were catching on quickly. This judge did not suffer fools. Then she reached the middle of the stack. Next, a request for an ex parte temporary restraining order, Caldwell versus Caldwell. The frantic woman from the lobby, Miriam Caldwell, was sitting in the front row, trembling. "Ms. Caldwell, please approach," Isolde said. She read the petition. It was a brutal, straightforward story of spousal abuse and escalating threats. "Ms. Caldwell, I have read your petition. I find your claims credible and the threat imminent. The temporary restraining order is granted, effective immediately," Isolde said. The woman burst into tears, this time of relief. "Thank you, Your Honor." "Oh, God, thank you." "Officer Garrick," Isolde said, "please escort Ms. Caldwell to the TRO office to have the order served and ensure she has a safe escort from this building." "Yes, Your Honor," Garrick said, moving. "And Ms. Fitch," Isolde said, her voice suddenly sharp. Dolores flinched as if struck. "Yes, Your Honor. Please bring me the original filing of Caldwell versus Caldwell, the one from your desk." This was it. The air in the courtroom changed. This was not a normal request. "Your Honor," Dolores stammered, the file is... it's right here in the system." "I'm not asking about the system, Ms. Fitch. I am asking for the physical paper you stamped this morning. Retrieve it now." Dolores's face was ashen. This was a direct, impossible to misunderstand order. She walked, her legs like lead, back to her office behind the courtroom. The entire room was silent, watching this bizarre, tense drama unfold. She returned a moment later with the file. She handed it up to Isolde. Isolde looked at it. She looked at the smudged red ink stamp in the corner. "Received at an earlier time." She then looked up at the large institutional clock on the courtroom wall. Ms. Fitch, Isolde said, her voice dangerously quiet. I observed you take this filing from Ms. Caldwell myself. I observed you stamp it. Dolores's breath was coming in short, panicked gasps. And my observation, Isolde continued, is that this filing was received by you later, not at the stamped time. The courtroom exploded in hushed whispers. The lawyer's eyes went wide. This was an accusation of backdating, a cardinal sin. Your Honor, there must be a mistake. The clock, my stamp. Dolores was dissolving. There is a mistake, Isolde said, her voice like steel. But it is not mine. I am also curious, Ms. Fitch, about the emergency override fee you charged Ms. Caldwell, the $150 in cash. I'd like to know what statute or county ordinance authorizes that specific fee. Dolores Fitch made a small, strangled sound. She gripped the clerk's station. She was trapped. She had been caught red-handed by the one person she couldn't bully, lie to, or dismiss. And then Isolde said, raising her voice to address the entire court, we are going to have a long discussion about docket assignments, specifically the pre-arrangement consultation you had this morning with a Mr. Barrett Sloan. In the back of the courtroom, Barrett Sloan, who had just sauntered in to handle his case, froze. His smug grin vanished. He saw Dolores's white face, and then his eyes locked with Isolde's. He knew instantly that he was caught. Isolde Merrick leaned forward. Miss Fitch, I'm ordering an immediate recess. I am also ordering Officer Garrick to secure your desk, your computer, and your personal effects. You are not to touch anything. We will be having a meeting with the presiding judge and the district attorney's office, Officer Garrick. Your Honor, please escort Ms. Fitch to my chambers and Officer Garrick. Yes, Your Honor. Call the DA. Tell him to send his best investigator from the Public Integrity Unit immediately and ensure Mr. Barrett Sloan does not leave the courthouse. I believe he is a material witness to multiple felonies. All rise, Garrick bellowed, his voice booming as Isolde stood and swept from the bench. Dolores Fitch let out a low wail and sank into her chair, her face in her hands. The entire courtroom was in stunned, chaotic silence. The gavel had fallen, not on a defendant, but on the system itself. Isolde's chambers were a hive of sudden, furious activity. Officer Garrick stood by the door with a trembling, weeping Dolores Fitch, who had been placed in a simple guest chair. Isolde was on the phone, not with the presiding judge, not yet. She was on the phone with Desmond Quill, the court administrator. Desmond, this is Judge Merrick. Yes, the new 3B. No, I haven't had a chance to look at the packet, and that's why I'm calling, Isolde said, her voice a whip crack of controlled fury. She watched Dolores over the rim of her desk. I'm calling to inform you that I have just placed your head clerk, Dolores Fitch, on administrative leave, effective 1 minute ago. The voice on the other end of the phone was a squawk of protest. With all due respect, Desmond, I don't give a damn about protocol. I'm telling you what I saw. I've been in this courthouse since early. I have personally witnessed Ms. Fitch commit, by my count, at least 3 separate felonies: bribery, extortion, and tampering with court records. So you can either come down here and manage the administrative side of this, or you can read about it in the newspaper tomorrow after I'm done with the district attorney. Your choice. She hung up without waiting for a reply. Your Honor? Dolores whispered, her voice raw from crying. Please, it was a mistake, a misunderstanding. I'll pay the money back. You'll pay what money back, Ms. Fitch? Isolde asked, her voice soft. It was the prosecutor's trap. The $150 you extorted from a domestic violence victim, or the money Mr. Sloan gave you in the envelope? How many envelopes have there been, Dolores? How long has this been your little side business? I don't know what you're talking about. Dolores tried, a last desperate grasp at denial. You took a thick white envelope from Barrett Sloan in exchange for a folded piece of paper. You then placed that envelope in the top left-hand drawer of your desk, Isolde said, her voice devoid of emotion. I am willing to bet my entire judicial pension that when the investigators open that drawer, they will find that envelope and it will be full of cash. Am I wrong? Dolores' face crumpled. She knew she was done. The precision of the observation was undeniable. The door to the chambers opened, and presiding Judge Thaddeus swept in. He was an older man with a lion's mane of white hair, and he looked apoplectic. Merrick, what in God's name is the meaning of this? He boomed. You can't just detain a court employee. You've thrown the entire morning docket into chaos. There are procedures. Judge Thaddeus, Isolde said, standing up. She was shorter than him, but she seemed to take up all the oxygen in the room. Please sit, Miss Fitch, she gestured to Dolores, is a criminal. I caught her red-handed, selling docket assignments and extorting victims. Thaddeus stopped, his mouth open. Dolores? Our Dolores? She's been here for 30 years. That's a libelous accusation, Judge. Is it? Isolde said. She walked over to Officer Garrick. Officer, you secured her desk. Yes, Your Honor. Nothing in or out. Excellent. Judge Thaddeus, Isolde said, turning back to him. Will you accompany me on a brief field trip? Without waiting for an answer, Isolde swept out of her chambers, past the roiling chaos of the courtroom hallway, and back to the clerk's office. Thaddeus and Garrick, with Dolores in tow, followed. The lobby was packed and buzzing. Everyone knew something was wrong. Isolde ignored them all, walked behind the counter, and stood at Dolores' desk. The top left-hand drawer, Ms. Fitch, Isolde said. Please open it. Dolores, shaking like a leaf, used her key. She pulled the drawer open. Inside, beneath a stack of sticky notes and paper clips, were 2 envelopes. One was the thick white one from Barrett Sloan. The other was a crumpled mess of bills, the $150 from Miriam Caldwell. Judge Thaddeus let out a sound like a deflating tire. Oh, Dolores, no. Isolde, using a pen to avoid touching the envelopes, nudged the white one. This one, I suspect, is from Mr. Sloan. She turned to Thaddeus. She's been selling docket assignments, Judge, letting lawyers like Sloan know in advance who they're getting, so they can prep for a friendly judge or ditch a hard one. She's been poisoning the well. And this, Isolde said, gesturing to the crumpled cash, is from a victim of domestic violence. Ms. Fitch charged her $150 to backdate a restraining-order petition, a petition that by law she is required to file for free. She extorted a woman who was terrified for her life. Judge Thaddeus looked at Dolores with a profound, soul-deep disappointment. Dolores, why? Dolores finally broke. It was a complete shattering confession. Because they don't pay me enough? She shrieked, her voice cracking. 30 years in this pigsty. 30 years of dealing with this trash. She gestured to the lobby. 30 years of fixing the judge's mistakes, of being yelled at, of being treated like a servant. Sloan, he was just grateful. He said I deserved more, and that woman, she was late. There are rules. The rules you broke, Isolde said, her voice like ice. The rules you sold. At that moment, 2 men in dark suits arrived. They flashed badges at Officer Garrick, DA's office, Public Integrity. We got a call from a Judge Merrick. That's me, Isolde said, stepping forward. Gentlemen, welcome to the Waverly County Courthouse. This is your primary suspect, Ms. Dolores Fitch, And this, she gestured to the drawer, is your primary evidence. I believe you'll find she's been running a pay-to-play scheme for at a minimum the last couple of hours. I suspect, given her arrogance, it's been going on for years. Isolde then pointed to the door. Your co-conspirator, Mr. Barrett Sloan, is currently being detained in my courtroom. I'd start with him. The investigator's eyes lit up. This wasn't a case they'd have to build. It was a gift-wrapped conviction. As the investigators began the formal process, reading Dolores her rights, photographing the drawer, Isolde turned to Judge Thaddeus. This is the rot, Judge, she said, her voice low. This is what happens when we, the judiciary, get too comfortable. We let the Doloreses of the world run things. We trade integrity for convenience. This isn't just her failure, it's ours. Thaddeus, who had been a judge for 2 decades, looked around his lobby as if seeing it for the first time. He saw the desperate faces, the confusion, the fear, and he saw the woman who had been exploiting it all. You're right, Judge, he said, his voice heavy. You are absolutely right. He looked at Isolde, his eyes filled with a new dawning respect. What do you need? I need a new clerk, Isolde said. A temporary one immediately. Someone who understands that their only job is to serve the public, not to rule it. And I need a full top-to-bottom audit of every case Ms. Fitch and Mr. Sloan have ever touched together. This, she said, looking at the crying, hyperventilating Dolores, is just the tip of the iceberg. The arrest of Dolores Fitch sent a seismic shock wave through the courthouse. She was not just an employee, she was an institution. The sight of her being led out of the lobby in handcuffs, sobbing and shouting about her 30 years, was a spectacle that brought the building to a grinding halt. But Isolde Merrick was just getting started. While the DA's investigators processed Dolores, who, faced with the irrefutable evidence, had begun to sing like a canary, Isolde had Barrett Sloan brought to her chambers. He entered not with handcuffs, but with 2 very large bailiffs and his own high-priced lawyer who had apparently been on speed dial. The smugness was gone, replaced by a waxy, terrified pallor. Judge Merrick? His lawyer began, a man named Harris. My client is here voluntarily, but... Save it, Mr. Harris, Isolde said, sitting behind her new desk. Your client is not here voluntarily. He is here because I ordered him detained as a material witness to bribery of a court officer. However, in the last 30 minutes, Ms. Fitch has cooperated, and it seems material witness is being upgraded to co-conspirator. Sloan went white. It was a gift. She helps me with scheduling. It's a tip like a barista. Isolde actually laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. A tip? Mr. Sloan, you are an officer of the court. You know, just as I know, that what you did was bribe a public official to gain an unfair advantage in the judicial assignment process. You weren't tipping her. You were paying her to stack the deck, to compromise the very foundation of blind justice in this county. She leaned forward. So here is what is going to happen. The DA's investigators are right next door. In a moment, they are going to come in here and arrest you. You will be processed, and your bail will be set at a level that will make your eyes water. The state bar will be notified this afternoon, and your license will be summarily suspended by sundown. This is an outrage, Harris blustered. No, this is a reckoning, Isolde corrected him. However, I am a practical woman. Ms. Fitch's corruption is my primary concern. You, she said to Sloan, are just a symptom. So you have one choice. You can cooperate fully. You can detail every single bribe, every case you paid to have steered, every piece of information you bought from her. You will wear a wire, and you will help them uncover just how deep this rot goes. If you do that, Maybe the DA will be inclined to listen when you ask for leniency. Or you can play tough with Mr. Harris, and I will personally recommend to the DA that you are charged with the maximum on every single count. Your career is over, Mr. Sloan. The only question is whether you spend the next 10 years in a cell. Sloan looked at his lawyer, his eyes screaming for help. Harris, seeing the brick wall in front of him, just sighed and loosened his tie. You should listen to the judge, Barrett. Sloan collapsed. He confessed to everything. It was worse than Isolde had imagined. For 5 years, Sloan had been paying Dolores. It started small, $100 to lose a file for a day. It escalated to $500 to guarantee his case landed in front of a notoriously lenient part-time judge. But the real bombshell, the one that made Isolde feel sick, was what was in the folded paper she'd seen him take that morning. It wasn't a docket assignment. It was a sealed witness list. Sloan's arrangement was for a high-profile felony assault. His client was a wealthy, connected thug. The paper Dolores had given him contained the name and home address of the prosecution's star witness, the victim's sister who had been in hiding. Dolores Fitch hadn't just been selling scheduling favors. She had been selling people for cash. Isolde's blood ran cold. She immediately called the DA's investigator back in. Forget Sloan. I need a protective detail. Now. Get a team to this address, she said, reading the address from Sloan's confession. The witness in State versus Beaumont is compromised. The revelation changed everything. This was no longer bribery. This was conspiracy. This was endangerment. This was a level of corruption that could get people killed. The karma that hit Dolores Fitch was no longer about losing her job. It was about losing her life. When confronted with this, with the fact that her tip had put a woman's life in mortal danger, even Dolores's defenses shattered. The investigators found a client list in a locked drawer. Barrett Sloan was just one of 6 lawyers in her pay-for-play scheme. She had a ledger. She had dates. She had amounts. Her 30 years of service was a 30-year criminal enterprise built on a foundation of casual cruelty and systemic racism and funded by extorting the desperate and the corrupt. She wasn't just fired. She was held without bail as a flight risk and a danger to the community. Her entire life's work, her identity as the queen of the courthouse, was incinerated in the space of 3 hours. All because she laughed at the wrong woman. All because she assumed that a black woman in a pantsuit couldn't possibly be her new boss. The Waverly County Courthouse did not recover quickly. The Dolores Fitch scandal, as the papers dubbed it, was catastrophic. Dolores Fitch pleaded guilty to a slew of charges, including 14 counts of bribery, 28 counts of tampering with public records, and 1 count of conspiracy to obstruct justice. The judge, brought in from another county, threw the book at her. The 30 years of service was not a mitigating factor. It was an aggravating one. She was sentenced to 12 years in state prison. She fainted when the sentence was read. Barrett Sloan was disbarred. His testimony, given in exchange for a lighter sentence, took down 3 other lawyers and permanently tarnished the careers of 2 more. His wealthy client, seeing the case against him implode, also took a plea. The witness thankfully had been secured by the DA's team just in time, but Isolde Merrick's work was far from over. The real karma wasn't just Dolores's punishment, it was the rebuilding. Isolde, with the full backing of a humbled Judge Thaddeus, led the charge. Her first act was to hire a new head clerk. She promoted the young, timid public defender who had been Dolores's first victim of the day. He was stunned, but Isolde saw his core of integrity. "Mr. Whittaker," she told him in her chambers, "I'm not offering you this job because you're a great lawyer. I'm offering it because you were respectful. Even when you were being disrespected, you followed the rules, even when you were being bullied. This office doesn't need a tyrant. It needs a public servant. Can you be that?" He accepted, and his first act was to hang a new sign at the clerk's window in English and Spanish. "We are here to help. Your dignity is our priority." Isolde's second act was to find Miriam Caldwell, the woman who had paid the $150 bribe. Isolde personally apologized to her on behalf of the court. She had the $150 returned to her from a court emergency fund, and she presided over Ms. Caldwell's final restraining order hearing herself, granting a permanent 5-year order of protection. Justice, delayed and extorted, was finally served. But the biggest change was in the atmosphere. Judge Isolde Merrick had in one morning established a new standard. Her courtroom 3B became a legend. It was efficient. It was intolerant of games. But it was above all fair. She treated the public defenders with the same respect as the corporate lawyers. She listened to defendants. She explained her rulings. The casual, cruel racism that Dolores had wielded like a weapon was gone, choked out by the new light. Months later, Isolde was walking through the lobby at the end of a long day. The lobby was clean. The air felt lighter. The new head clerk, Mr. Whitaker, was at the window patiently explaining a complex filing procedure to a young woman. The young woman was black. She was dressed in a simple suit, and she was clearly nervous, a first-year associate from a small firm. "I know it's confusing," Whitaker was saying kindly. "The motion for substitution of counsel has to be filed with the original case number, but the proposed order needs, here. Let me just show you." He came out from behind the glass and stood beside her, pointing to the line on her form. The young lawyer looked up at him, her relief palpable. Thank you so much. I was worried I'd get it wrong." "Everyone gets it wrong the first time," Whitaker smiled. "My job is to help you get it right. Welcome to Waverly County, Counselor." Isolde watched the exchange. She saw the young lawyer stand up straighter, her confidence restored. She saw the fear in her eyes replaced by a look of belonging. Isolde continued walking toward the exit. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The quiet click-clack of her heels on the polished floor was the only sound. It was the sound of integrity. It was the sound of a promise kept. The fortress had been breached, the rot had been carved out, and the work of justice, real justice, was finally beginning. True karma isn't just about punishment. It's about consequences. Dolores Fitch's racist, arrogant laughter was an investment in her own destruction. She spent 30 years building a corrupt kingdom. But she tore it all down in one morning because she couldn't see past the color of a woman's skin. She didn't just lose her job, she lost her freedom. And Judge Isolde Merrick didn't just get an apology. She got a chance to rebuild the entire system. She replaced the rot with respect. She tore down the walls of prejudice and rebuilt a foundation of integrity. This story is a powerful reminder that the person you dismissed today could be the person who holds your entire world in their hands tomorrow. Respect is not optional. It's the law. What did you think of Dolores's downfall? Was it justified? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you love stories where hard karma is served, do me a favor. Hit that like button, share this video with a friend who needs to see it, and most importantly, hit subscribe and ring that bell. We have new dramatic stories dropping every week, and you won't want to miss a single one.